Hello, I'm Simone de Haas, and welcome to Expert Voices by Keynote Women, a podcast where bold ideas and diverse voices shape the future of leadership. I'm a member of Keynote Women, a global volunteer-led network of speakers founded to bring more women and diversity to stages around the world. In this episode, I want to share some reflections from the wings of the stage and the rooms in which leadership is happening in real time, and why understanding leadership presence might matter now more than ever. But before we dive in, a little bit more about me. So my work is drawn from more than 4 decades of professional theatre direction, performance psychology, and the magic of storytelling. I'm a leadership, presence, and speaker strategist, and my work centers on helping leaders and speakers understand how meaning is shaped not just by what they say, but how they show up. There's a moment that most leaders and speakers rarely speak about. It happens just before visibility, before they walk on, before the introduction, before everyone turns towards you expecting something useful, wise, or impactful. You're there, you're qualified, you're experienced, you're perfectly capable. And still that voice in your head goes, who do you think you are? I've seen this with CEOs, founders, technical experts, and keynote speakers across the globe. Extraordinary women. And yet, exposure has a way of making us renegotiate our belonging. So today, I want to talk about leadership at that precise point where doubt and authority meet. Because in that moment, something very important is decided. Who is holding the mic? I've watched this play out hundreds of times. A brilliant executive walks into a boardroom. She's prepared a presentation that could change the trajectory of the company. She knows her material inside out, and she's earned her seat at that table 10 times over. And yet, in the 30 seconds before she begins, something happens. A micro hesitation, a slight apology in her posture, an urge to justify her presence before she's even opened her mouth. It's almost invisible, but it is felt, and it changes everything. And I want to tell you, I know this feeling intimately. You might think that after 4 decades in theatre, standing in front of audiences would feel very natural to me, easy even, but it doesn't, not always. I remember a keynote that I was asked to deliver quite early on in my career as a speaker, not as a director, but as a person with something to say. And it was for an international conference for professional speakers. Hundreds of people in the audience, my name in the program, my photograph on the website. And I stood backstage and I could hear the introduction beginning, my bio being read out loud, the applause building. And suddenly, out of nowhere, my body went into complete meltdown. My hands got so cold, my breath was shallow, I felt lightheaded, disconnected even, as if I were watching myself from somewhere else entirely. And the thought that went through my mind wasn't, I'm nervous. It was, I cannot do this. Not, this is hard, but I am incapable. And here's the thing. I had spent decades helping actors work through stage fright. I understood the physiology. I knew the techniques. I could talk anyone else through this moment with complete confidence. But when it was my turn to walk into the light, all of that knowledge evaporated. And what saved me, and I mean this quite literally, was a stage manager who saw me just frozen there in the wings. And she didn't say, you'll be fine. She didn't try to talk me out of what I was feeling. She simply said, feel your feet. And then she waited. And I looked down and I felt the floor. I took one breath, then another. And she said, now walk. And I did. I walked onto that stage with my heart still pounding, my hands still trembling, but I walked. And when I got to the microphone, I didn't try to hide what I was feeling. I didn't perform confidence I didn't have. I paused, I looked at the room, and I simply said, I'm so glad to be here with you. Not, I'm honored, not, thank you for having me, just, I'm glad to be here. And I felt the room relax. And when the room relaxed, I relaxed. And we began. And that moment taught me something that I now teach every single leader that I work with. You don't have to eliminate the fear. You just have to be willing to bring it along with you, because the fear isn't the enemy of leadership. Pretending it isn't there is. So I would like to suggest that we reframe that imposter energy as a visibility response. Because what you're feeling is not evidence of inadequacy, it's a nervous system response to being seen. Eyes are on you. Outcome is uncertain in that moment. Your reputation is on the line. And of course, your body is going to activate. But the mistake we make is assuming that activation equals being incapable. It doesn't. It means that leadership is alive and well and living in the moment. So I want you to think about what visibility actually means in a biological sense. You become the focal point. The room's attention narrows towards you. Your nervous system registers this as exposure, and it does what it's designed to do. It mobilizes energy. Your heart rate increases, your breath changes, your awareness sharpens. This is not dysfunction. This is readiness. And the problem is that we've been taught to interpret these signals as proof that we shouldn't be there. We think, if I were truly qualified, I wouldn't feel this. But that's backward thinking. The feeling is there because you're qualified, because you care about the outcome, because what you're about to do actually matters. Apathy doesn't activate the nervous system. Mattering does. So when you feel that flutter before you speak, before you lead, before you step into visibility, that's not imposter syndrome in the traditional sense. That's your nervous system recognizing the stakes. So the question isn't how do you eliminate the response? It's what do you do with it? You know, in theatre, we call this pre-show energy. It's the hum backstage before the curtain. Every actor feels it, from first-timers to performers who've been doing this for 50 years. And the ones who struggle are the ones who fight it. The ones who thrive learn to ride it like a wave. And the same is true in leadership. Now, the trouble starts, though, when we let that sensation run our behaviour, or what I call behavioural drift. We rush, we over-explain, we try to prove our worthiness. We become impressive instead of relational. And without meaning to, we dilute the connection. Have you ever walked away from a presentation or a meeting and thought, well, that was competent, but it didn't really feel like me? Well, that's usually what happened. So let me be more specific about what behavioural drift looks like. You start talking before you fully entered the room, physically or energetically. You fill silence with apologies. I know you're all busy, or I'll keep this brief, or this might not be relevant, but you perform competence rather than embody it. You speak faster, pack in more data, reference more credentials than necessary. You scan the room for validation instead of connection. You're reading faces for approval rather than truly seeing the people in front of you. And here's what's fascinating about that behavior. The audience feels this, not because they're judging you, but because your uncertainty creates a kind of static between you and them. They can't quite settle because you haven't quite settled. I see this all the time in rehearsal. An actor knows their lines perfectly, they understand the character, but they're so focused on not making a mistake that they forget to actually be present. The performance might be technically correct, but emotionally unavailable. And this same thing happens in leadership. When you're busy managing that internal narrative, am I good enough? Do they believe me? Am I saying this right? You're not fully available to lead. And leadership at its core is about availability. The willingness to be here with these people in this moment for this purpose. Everything else is secondary. In theatre, we have a term for this behavior. It's called indicating. It's when an actor shows you what the character is feeling instead of actually feeling it. They're performing anger rather than being angry, performing confidence rather than being confident. And audiences sense it immediately. Look, they might not know the technical term, but they know that something is off. And leadership has the same problem. When you're indicating authority instead of inhabiting it, people feel the gap. So here's what the world of theatre can teach us about that. Authority is not awarded, it is occupied through orientation, through the breath, through the feet, and through attention, through the willingness to let people meet you before you begin leading them. So let me just unpack that phrase a little. Authority is occupied. In theatre, we talk about owning the stage, but it's not about dominance or control. It's about being fully present in the space that you're in. An actor who owns the stage doesn't do more, they do less. They arrive, they orient to the space, to the room, to the relationship. They give themselves permission to be seen. And that's where leadership presence begins. Not with charisma, not with confidence, with orientation. Where am I? Who is here? What is needed? These are the three questions that ground you in authority. When I work with leaders, I often start with something very simple. Stand still. Feel your feet. Notice the room. That sounds almost absurdly basic, doesn't it? But it's astonishing how rare it is. We are so conditioned to perform, to impress, to earn our place, that we forget the most fundamental thing. Your presence is the foundation of your influence. If you're not there, truly there, nothing else you say or do will land with full impact. One of the things I will often say to speakers and leaders is to never start until the room has arrived. And what I mean by that is don't begin speaking while people are still settling, still scrolling on their phones, still mentally elsewhere. Wait. Use your presence to gather the room together. Let them feel you before you tell them anything. Now, this is not about power. It's about respect. You're signaling, I'm here for you. I'm not going to waste your time. This matters. And people respond to that. They sit up, they tune in, they arrive because you've arrived. In theatre, it's about commanding the space or the stage. But it's not about commanding people. It's about being so grounded in where you are that the space itself shifts. You're not forcing attention, you're creating a gravitational pull, if you like. So think about the last time you saw a great actor walk onto a stage. They don't announce themselves, they don't demand you look at them. They simply arrive so fully that you can't look anywhere else. That's the beginning of real leadership presence. And this applies far beyond the stage. It applies in boardrooms, client meetings, negotiations, difficult conversations. If we are busy proving we deserve to be there, we're not fully available to the people who need us. But when we arrive, settled and in our skin, something remarkable happens. Everyone else settles too. And that is influence. Now, I want to be clear about something. This isn't just a performance skill. This is leadership infrastructure. Think about those moments when leadership is most needed, when there's a lot of uncertainty, when stakes are high, when emotions are running hot. In those moments, what people need most is not your brilliant analysis, although that matters. What they need is your steadiness, your ability to be present without being defensive, your capacity to hold complex situation without collapsing, your willingness to let the discomfort of the moment exist without rushing to resolve it prematurely. And I've seen leaders navigate incredibly difficult conversations, restructures, ethical failures, strategic pivots. And what made the difference wasn't their eloquence, it was their groundedness. They didn't perform certainty that they didn't have. They didn't over-explain or justify. They arrived as themselves, acknowledged what was true in that moment, and stayed present through the difficulty. And what I've noticed, and I'm sure you have noticed it too, is that when a leader is settled, the room can access its own intelligence. People stop pretending, they stop performing, they start contributing, because your presence has created permission for theirs. To me, that is the real work of leadership. Not to have all the answers, but to create the conditions where good thinking can happen. And that starts with how you arrive. In the world of theatre, the director's job isn't to have every answer. It's to hold the space where the work can emerge. You create essentially the container. You set the conditions. You stay grounded while everyone else is figuring it out. And leadership works in the exact same way. So let me show you what this looks like in practice. A few years ago, I was facilitating a leadership presence workshop. It was set in a theatre, but there was no stage set, no fanfare, no introductions, just a room of senior managers and executives gathered for what they assumed would be strategies, frameworks, perhaps a keynote. Instead, I gave them theatre. Without warning, two actors burst into the space, and the shift in energy was immediate. It was a raw, emotionally charged confrontation which unfolded before the audience. Raised voices, tension crackling, and the air felt thick with intensity. One actor stepped forward, pleading. The other turned away, fist clenched. A final explosive line rang out, and then silence. The actors exited abruptly, leaving behind a stunned room. And I let the silence stretch. I allowed the weight of that moment to settle. And then I turned to the audience and I said, "What did you just see?" They were hesitant to respond at first. Some commented on the emotions, others on the intensity of the exchange, and a few speculated on the relationship between the characters. Many of them admitted, though, that they weren't exactly sure what had happened, only that they had felt it. And after a moment, I invited the actors back, but this time I gave the audience a task. I said, "Watch again, but this time notice the details. Pay attention to where they hold tension in their bodies. Listen for the shifts in tone and the pauses. Observe what draws you in and what makes you just a bit uneasy. So the scene played out again, identical in words and movement, but transformed in impact. Because now the audience saw more. The subtle shift in eye contact, that barely perceptible hesitation before a line, the way one character's shoulders dropped at a critical moment. They weren't just watching this time, they were reading presence. And when it ended, I asked again, "What did you see?" And this time the responses were completely different. The audience spoke of power dynamics, of vulnerability, of unspoken intentions woven into the fabric of the performance. They saw beyond the surface. And so I asked them what changed. The answer, of course, wasn't the scene itself. It was their perception. This is the essence of presence. Leadership, like theatre, is not just about what is being said, but how it is being received. It's about what exists in the space between words, in the tone, in the stance, in the pauses that carry as much weight as the sentences themselves. Presence is not a performance. It's a perception. The way we show up, the way we are experienced by others is not about simply being confident or commanding attention. It's about how we shape the energy of a room, how we hold space, how we signal credibility, authority, or approachability, not through force, but through alignment of voice, body, and intention. Presence is often misunderstood as a fixed quality, something you either have or you don't. But in reality, presence is relational. It exists in the space between a speaker and their listener, between a leader and their team, between what is said and what is felt. And just like in theatre, the way we experience presence depends on what we are attuned to notice. That day, those executives learned a critical lesson. If you don't know what to look for, you miss half the story. And in leadership, as in theatre, the unseen is often where the real power lies. As I begin to wrap up, let me offer you a few foundational principles to take with you. The first, presence precedes performance. If you want people to trust you, let them meet you first. Not your credentials, not your cleverness, you. Second, presence is not accidental, it is cultivated. And the greatest leaders, like the greatest performers, don't just deliver a message, they embody it. Third, doubt doesn't disqualify you. The presence of nerves is not evidence you shouldn't be there. It's evidence that you are human and the stakes are real. What matters is whether the doubt is in control or whether you are. Fourth, leadership is relational before it's transactional. People follow you, not because you impressed them, but because they felt seen by you. If your presence is about proving yourself, you've already created distance. If your presence is about serving the moment, you've created connection. Number 5, slow down to speed up. Now, I know the instinct is to rush, to get through it, to prove yourself quickly, to earn your place. But rushing undermines your authority. Stillness creates it. So when the moment comes and you feel that flutter of visibility, pause, ground yourself, arrive fully. It will feel like eternity to you, but it will feel like clarity to your audience. And finally, train yourself to see what others miss. Remember those executives watching the scene twice? The scene did not change. Their perception did. Once they knew what to look for, the body language, the pauses, the tension, they saw an entirely different performance. And the same is true when people experience your leadership. They're not just hearing your words, they're reading your presence, the steadiness of your gaze, the groundedness in your stance, the pauses between your sentences, the tension you hold or release. And you have more control over this than you think. Not through manipulation or performance, but through intention and awareness. If leadership right now requires anything, it is presence that creates trust, not performance that seeks approval. So when the moment comes and visibility finds you, try orienting instead of defending. Feel the ground, see the people. Begin from there. Because leadership is not a test that you pass, it is a relationship that you enter. And perhaps this is the most important thing I can leave you with today. We're living at a time where leadership is being redefined. The old models, the command and control, the charismatic solo hero, the person with all the answers are crumbling. What's emerging is something much more human, more collaborative, more present. And that requires a different kind of courage. Not the courage to be perfect, the courage to be real, to show up as yourself. Qualified, yes, but also learning. Capable, yes, but also uncertain. Authoritative, yes, but also open. This is the leadership the world needs now, because the complex challenges we face requires collective intelligence, and collective intelligence requires trust, and trust requires presence. So the next time you stand in the wings, literally or metaphorically, before a moment of visibility, I invite you to try something. Don't perform your way into belonging. Orient your way into relationship. Feel your feet, breathe, see the people, let them see you. Because you don't need to earn your place. You need to occupy it. And when you do, something remarkable happens. Not just for you, for everyone in the room. In theatre, we know that the audience completes the performance. Without them, it's just rehearsal. They're not passive. They are co-creators. And the same is true in leadership. You're not performing to an audience. You're creating something together. And that starts the moment you decide to be fully, unapologetically present. I'm Simone de Haas. Thank you for joining me on Expert Voices. If this episode inspired you, please share it forward. Let's keep reimagining what leadership can be together. To find me and to discover more voices and perspectives, visit keynotewomen.com and stay tuned for more stories, bold ideas, and leadership reimagined.